Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're breaking down Operation Absolute Resolve, an incredibly high-stakes special operations raid that literally plucked a dictator from his own fortress. So how in the world did they pull this off? Let's get into it. Okay, so picture this. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, dead of night, over Caracas, Venezuela. The entire operation kicks off at this exact moment when a wave of targeted missile strikes just shatters the quiet, marking the beginning of one of the boldest capture missions we've seen in a long time. So let's dive right into the heart of the operation itself, the assault. And let's be clear, this wasn't some quiet, sneaky infiltration. No, this was a full-on frontal assault on a fortress. The whole thing really unfolded in 4 very distinct phases. You had a specialized team, we're talking Delta Force and the FBI's hostage rescue team, tasked with the mission. And yes, the FBI was there to make the official arrest. I mean, the sheer audacity of this plan is just staggering. Their target, Fort Tiuna, is basically Venezuela's version of the Pentagon. We're talking a mountain fortress defended by 5,000 loyal troops. And to get in, a force of 11 helicopters flew in at treetop level, skimming just 100 feet above the Caribbean. Incredible. Now, while that ground team was getting ready to hit the fortress, the skies above Caracas just erupted. A massive force of 150 aircraft, F-22s, F-35s, the whole 9 yards, launched a huge air campaign. Their job? Simple. Achieve total air supremacy, protect those incoming choppers, and cause as much chaos on the ground as possible. You know, an operation this crazy doesn't just happen overnight. It was really the final move after months and months of careful, secret preparation. Let's take a look at how they actually set the stage for this whole thing. This timeline really reveals the patient, deliberate groundwork that was laid over 4 entire months. It started with CIA operatives slipping into the country, using stealth drones to map out Maduro's every move, and it all led up to digital booby traps being set by U.S. Cyber Command. So, the absolute key to this entire operation was figuring out Maduro's pattern of life. It's an intelligence term for a target's daily routine. By tracking him so carefully for months, they could predict with almost total certainty exactly where he would be on the night of the raid, in one specific residence inside that massive Fort Tiuna complex. All right, so just as those 11 helicopters are closing in, bam, a digital bomb goes off. Malware that had been planted weeks earlier by U.S. Cyber Command suddenly plunges the entire base and a lot of the capital city into total darkness, cutting off communications and crippling any hope of a coordinated defense. But this is where the story gets really interesting, because it brings us to the central mystery of the whole raid. You've got 5,000 elite soldiers guarding this fortress, right? And yet the resistance they put up was surprisingly weak. So what happened? I mean, military observers were absolutely stunned by how little resistance there was. So in the aftermath, a few very different and frankly, almost conspiratorial theories have popped up to try and explain what really went down that night. Okay, so let's walk through these competing theories. First, you've got the simple idea of overwhelming force, that the U.S. assault was just too big and too fast to stop. Then there's the more cloak and dagger theory of a negotiated exit, that the whole raid was just political theater. And the fact they extracted Maduro's wife, who wasn't even charged with a crime, definitely raises some eyebrows. Third, the betrayal theory, that someone high up in Maduro's inner circle told the troops to stand down, maybe for a massive CIA payday. And finally, the technology gap. U.S. helicopters had things like dark flares and special lasers that made them basically invisible to heat-seeking missiles. The truth? It's probably a little bit of all of these things combined. So why? Why pull off such a risky and frankly audacious operation in the first place? Well, the answer isn't just about Venezuela. It's about a much, much larger game of geopolitical chess. And you can really see the pro-interventionist argument summarized perfectly in this quote from one of our sources. It frames the whole raid as this necessary, almost heroic action to protect the region from a tyrannical regime. The official justification was basically preemptive. The U.S. was worried that Maduro's growing alliances with Russia and China would create a hostile base of operations right in the Western Hemisphere. They were pointing to Russia's actions in Ukraine and China's moves in the South China Sea as a big warning sign of what could happen if they just sat back and did nothing. So Maduro's gone. They got their man. But, you know, the raid didn't just remove a leader. It created a massive power vacuum. So what's the situation on the ground now? Well, right away, you see this huge disconnect between the U.S. plan and the reality in Venezuela. While the U.S. sets up a naval blockade to control the country's oil money, the new acting president is playing a double game, publicly trash-talking the U.S. while apparently cooperating in secret. It's a recipe for chaos, and nobody's really sure who's in charge. And to really get why the public's reaction was so all over the place, you have to see this. Before the raid, Maduro's approval rating was just awful, hovering somewhere between 10 and 20%. So that explains the mixed reaction. You had some people literally celebrating in the streets, while his small but very loyal base was, of course, enraged. So, when all the dust settles, what are we left with? Well, the reality is, the raid didn't magically solve Venezuela's problems, it just created a whole new set of them. The aftermath is this chaotic mess of legal questions, a government in tatters, and a dictator waiting to go on trial in another country. And all of this leaves us with the final and most important question that hangs over this entire story. Yeah, the raid successfully removed a dictator, but it also completely shattered the power structure, leaving an entire nation and the world asking, who is actually in control now?